Yay. So you've made it to chapter 3 of this crazy experiment I've been putting myself through. Watching all this TV is probably not doing me any favors, and I'm sure it's killing off my brain cells faster than the US is sending troops overseas. But on the bright side, most all of the shows in this tier were solid. This is the transition video from the bad into the good, with me giving a solid thumbs up to every pilot in this batch. I wouldn't say any of these are must-watches by any means, but if you see or hear about something that piques your curiosity, give it a watch. I mean, it's the least you could do considering I sat through Henry fucking Danger for you assholes. Covering ranks 150 to 101, here's part 3 of the 250 TV pilots ranked miniseries, beginning with number 150, Band of Brothers. So far, I've watched David Schwimmer play an arrogant NSA agent named Jerry and a whiny wimp named Ross. But I wasn't expecting such a heartfelt, passionate, in-your-face performance like he gives here as Herbert Sobel. And it's not just him, but the entire cast here is pulling their respective weight, giving an eye-opening experience into the harsh, untamed world of war. Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks act as executive producers, and I believe it shows with a great sense of confidence. Number 149, Sex and the City. I'm hesitant to call this one of the best sitcoms of all time, but it's pretty good. Great chemistry all around makes you feel like part of the tightly knit group, and plenty of memorable moments make Sex and the City stand out amongst the billion other comedies set in the city that never sleeps. Number 148, Daredevil. Some very fun, tense action scenes spice up an otherwise mediocre crime thriller. Charlie Cox is quite good in this role, and his character was quite convincing, but I just wish the story was a little less cliche. Number 147, Brickleberry. Daniel Tosh is a very talented guy, and it's proven here with lively characters and a setting with some fantastic potential. Brickleberry kept me engaged, even if it had obvious comparisons to other adult cartoons out there. Number 146, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Any negatives I may have about this one aside, this show gets big marks from me for including penguins, as they are a top 3 animal of all time. I don't love anime shows like most, but Avatar is nicely paced with gorgeous animation and fun action scenes that add a lot to this one. Number 145, I Love Lucy. A classic if there ever was one, I Love Lucy started its reign strong with plenty of laughs packed into a breezy 25 minutes. Number 144, The Dick Van Dyke Show. Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke, in addition to each having 3 names, are wonderful together. And even though it went a little overboard towards the end, this was still a fun ride. And as an added bonus, it's free to watch right here on YouTube, so now you have no excuse. Number 143, Daria. Not quite to the level of Beavis and Butthead, but pretty solid overall. This is how slice of life is done, folks. Number 142, The Wire. Maybe a bit low for some, but even still a really solid start here. Crime dramas, as you know, aren't my cup of tea, but The Wire strikes a chord between the dense, adult themes of inner-city violence and the playful, charismatic charm of the cast to create an engaging hour of TV helmed by a phenomenal teleplay by David Simon. Not to mention, seeing Father Gabriel as a wisecracking detective is a level of whiplash even I haven't experienced before. Oh, and if you couldn't already guess. Number 141, Star Trek: The Next Generation. While it definitely isn't as good as the original, Picard and company do a lot right here, and the effects and stunt work are well done, especially considering this was direct to syndication after all. The major issue though is the length, clocking in at a whopping 92 minutes. This is the reason people prefer movies over TV, because studios think every damn episode should be a movie length. That is the only major downside though, so if you're looking for a solid sci-fi show and you haven't checked this one out for some reason, here's your excuse to do so. Number 140, Xena Warrior Princess. So I know this is dumb and cheesy and extremely dated, but this shit is pretty awesome. Lucy Lawless, in addition to having a name that I'd love to hear Barry Kripke pronounce, is a great choice for this role, and other big names attached to this project like Sam Raimi, for example, bring some great insight that most comic book shows didn't have back then. It may seem like one of those shows that would be buried under all the fantastic dramas that we have nowadays, but there's a reason the fan base on this one is still huge, and while many of these long drawn-out dramas have multiple award wins under their belts, they lack the one thing Xena got right from the start: unpretentiousness. It's that kind of show that's a product of its time, but in the best way possible. Number 139, Detroiters. Both Tim Robinson and Sam Richardson have done better than this, but they've both certainly done worse as well. So while this isn't winning any Emmys anytime soon, it's a solid enough comedy with likable leads and a couple very memorable guest stars. Number 138, ER. The hospital genre isn't going away anytime soon, but if there's one show that's earned its legacy as one of the best and longest running for a reason, ER is its name. Anthony Edwards, George Clooney, and all the other cast members making up the extensive cast list do a fantastic job here. And speaking of George Clooney, did you know he was on a different show also called ER from 1984, which was a sitcom set in a hospital as opposed to a drama? I swear at this point he's more of an actual doctor than Dr. Oz. Number 137, 911. Melodrama can be a turnoff for many, but 911 found a way to balance it with an engaging story and an interesting, diverse cast. Fox hit it big with this one, and for good reason, as the first rescue is one of the most shocking I've ever seen in a first responder show, a genre in which every show is always trying to one-up each other. Number 136, Lost. Premiering nearly 20 years ago, the special effects haven't aged particularly well, but outside of that one glaring issue, the story, characters, dialogue, everything else is very good. Matthew Fox as Jack is one of the best leads I watched for this entire project, and even though the story is pretty simple at its core, the execution is top-notch. And one other thing about this show, I don't normally get scared at TV, but Lost had some genuinely really well done jump scares that legitimately freaked me out, and that alone gets big marks from me. Number 135, CSI Vegas. So on an objective level, this is exactly what you'd want and or expect from a CSI show. Flashy presentation, technical speak behind the science of the murder, and even a song by The Who during the opening credits. It's really awesome that they brought back legacy actors like Georgia Fox and William Peterson as well for their respective characters, and those characters passing the torch to the next batch of crime scene investigators. With all that said though, CSI has never really been my cup of tea. I respect these shows and their popularity over the years, but I've always felt they were a little over the top at times. The action always seemed grounded, but everything else about it felt a little too fantastical to work properly. But I can guarantee you, if you are a CSI fan, you will go absolutely bananas for this, even if I don't personally. Number 134, Mayans MC. Now this is what I was hoping Sons of Anarchy would be like. Action-packed with snappy dialogue and some real, genuine tension. Danny Pino, who I know primarily through Law & Order SVU, was a welcome surprise as the leader of the Mexican drug cartel we follow in the series, and I thought the whole cast worked very well together. The stunts were great as well, such as the car chase / shootout at the start of the episode that really pulls you in from the get-go. But as many of you know, the negatives are soon to come, and in this case, I still feel like the pacing here was a little bit bloated. Trimming some of that fat off to get it under an hour I think would have improved it quite a bit, and this next one's on me, but I'm sure viewers of Sons of Anarchy probably recognize some Easter eggs or some little hidden details that enhance their enjoyment of it. But as a whole, this was very good and gives FX another solid notch on its belt. Number 133, Anger Management. So at the time when this premiered, the controversy and buzz surrounding Charlie Sheen's antics shot this bad boy up to number 1 in the cable ratings. I guess it's not that surprising considering how big of a show 2.5 Men was in its heyday, but even still, I wouldn't have suspected a solid 5.5 million viewers tuning in for anger management. With all that said though, I can't deny this one is pretty damn funny, and if you are a Charlie Sheen fan for better or for worse, I'm sure this is a pretty easy recommendation to you. Oh, and speaking of 2.5 Men, number 132, 2.5 Men. Yeah, I put the two Charlie Sheen shows together. What you gonna do about it? These were the good old days of 2.5 Men, when Charlie Sheen slept with beautiful women every week instead of bad-mouthing his castmates. John Cryer was the lovable dork who played Alan Harper, and Jake's only concern was what breakfast cereal he liked best. Like I said, the good old days. Number 131, The Flight Attendant. Kaylee Cuoco broke out of her shell with this one, shaking off the usual gag of playing the girl next door / the dumb blonde stereotype. But I have to also give credit to Rosie Perez on this one, an absolutely awesome performance as well. Number 130, American Crime Story, Impeachment. I'm not going to harp on this one like I did in Filmography Filing, but if you have any interest in the story of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, I'd recommend this one as it's definitely one of the strongest biopics I've seen in quite a bit. Number 129, Miranda. If you like Call Me Kat, you can click off the video right now, because bringing that toxicity to my channel is unacceptable. But if you're not a fan of Call Me Kat, however, give Miranda a try. It's what Call Me Kat is adapted from, and it obviously works much better in this context because Miranda Hart is way more believable in this type of role than Mayim Bialik is. Number 128, Unsupervised. I'm not sure why exactly I was so interested in checking this one out, but I must say I'm glad I did, as it's very slept on. It reminds me of late 90s MTV era cartoons that were all about youthful innocence and causing trouble in your small bullshit town while blasting Operation Ivy the whole time. It's also interesting to see that the cast from It's Always Sunny acted as producers for this show, in addition to the remarkable voice cast including Kristen Bell and Justin Long. It's no surprise that this show is so good considering the amount of talent behind it. Number 127, Star Vs. Star and Marco have instant chemistry, the action is a lot of fun, jokes that land. Oh, and Jenny Slate plays the sassy black best friend. What's not to like here? Number 126, That's So Raven. This was my favorite Disney Channel sitcom growing up, and while it never hit the same peaks as its Nickelodeon counterparts, especially in their respective pilots, because fuck me, does iCarly have an outstanding pilot episode. This is still a fun time and a nostalgic throwback to everyone who grew up with elite TV in the 2000s. Number 125, Angie Tribeca. So I must admit, I don't like Angie Tribeca as much as most of these other shows. In fact, it probably shouldn't even be in this tier at all. But as soon as I saw this one for the very first time, I knew this was going exactly at rank 125, directly in the middle of the pack, because I cannot, for the life of me, figure out what the hell this is supposed to be, and by extension, if I actually enjoy it or not. I've watched this thing at least 10 times, without question the most of any of these pilots, and every time I come back thinking, it's pretty good, and there are some parts I like about it, but there's also some really awful parts about it too. Moments of brilliance and moments that personally just make me go what the fuck, all wrapped up into one. The show is a police procedural starring our main protagonist, Angie Tribeca. Sounds simple enough, but you'll quickly come to learn that this is meant to be a full-on Mel Brooks / Jason Friedberg / Aaron Seltzer style parody. Some people have compared it to the Naked Gun movies, and yeah, that's pretty on point here. And side note, everyone acts like parody movies used to be amazing and now they're all ass cheeks, when in actuality they're all just kind of okay. Naked Gun is okay, superhero movies okay, and Angie Tribeca's just okay. But even outside of that, there's so many little things that throw me for a loop here, like the quote-unquote product placement, the release schedule for the series, the fact that Steve Carell and his wife Nancy wrote the script, the ridiculous pacing of this show that stuffs 13 fucking jokes a minute. No, that's not a joke. I counted. Take that, Drew Gooden. And the ginormous amount of guest stars that agreed to be part of this, which in this episode includes Lisa Kudrow and Gary Cole. And like, all of that is obviously meant to add to the ridiculousness of the series and the atmosphere of the show, but it still just feels like something's kinda off about this. This is the one show I hope someone watches and comments on, because I'd sincerely love to know if this is just actually okay like I think it is, or if I'm just going crazy because I can't handle this amount of TV. Number 124, Young and Hungry. Right off the bat, I'll come clean and say this isn't going to be for everybody. Similar to shows like iCarly 2021, How I Met Your Father, and Two Broke Girls, Young and Hungry is a dumb, trope-filled laugh track sitcom aimed at women. And while it would be easy to rip apart this thing limb by limb, just like those other shows, I enjoy this quite a bit. Emily Osment is super likable in this role, and the supporting cast are all very funny as well, with a great distribution of punchlines spread amongst everybody. And as I watch more and more TV over the years, I realize that these types of shows are just simply better than your stuffy period pieces and your over-the-top crime thrillers. It's just good, clean fun that puts your mind at ease when you just want to come home and kick your feet up to something good. Number 123, Come to Papa. This one has quite the backstory to it. Tom Papa, who was at the time working as a writer for SNL, pitched the idea to NBC of a sitcom in which a fictionalized version of himself is a wannabe comedian stuck at a dead-end job working for a New Jersey-based newspaper. The series got a lot of confidence from NBC, banking on Papa's natural charm and slick writing as demonstrated on SNL, eventually premiering on June 3rd, 2004 to miserable ratings and horrible critical reviews. Partially due in fact to mostly unknowns making up the cast and lack of positive ratings to hype up the series, Come to Papa would be pulled from TV after only a month, leaving 8 of its 12 episodes unaired. And that's where this story would have ended, if not for the fact that a couple of years back, the Lost Media Wiki suddenly found itself in a search for the series. As many channels did back then, the show's atrocious reception led it to being lost for years without many people interested in rewatching the show. And that's how I came across it for myself, just browsing the Lost Media Wiki and stumbling across the show's page. Luckily for me, the pilot is one of 2 episodes that have been found and uploaded to archive.com in August of 2020. As you can probably tell from this placement, I don't think it's truly as awful as everyone acts like it is. It's maybe not as polished as other sitcoms at the time, but there were definitely plenty of moments sprinkled through this that were very memorable, and the backstory adds a lot of intrigue that I believe the show does deliver on. Also, for any fans of Steve Carell or The Office or Michael Scott, you guys specifically need to see this one. I won't say why here, but believe me, it's very eye-opening. Number 122, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I mean, just to hear that glorious extended version of a theme song is easily enough to put it up this high. Number 121, The Middle. I know, I'm surprised just as much as you are. And to tell you the truth, it was almost inevitable. I mean, out of 250 episodes, you have to imagine that at least one show I notoriously dislike would have a decent pilot. And The Middle's honestly pretty solid. I think the one thing that's always turned me off about this show are the leads, whose other big TV shows, Scrubs and Everybody Loves Raymond respectively, I also cannot stand. So not exactly the strongest argument in convincing someone to check this show out, you know? Not to mention, having the breakout star be the one who plays the worst character, and for her to end up being one of the best voice actors working today, mostly known for her lead performance as the title character on Disney's Star vs. The Forces of Evil. Hey, we just talked about that show. Yeah, I gotta say, Didn't have that on my bingo card. But as far as the middle, while I recommend this pilot, you guys know how I feel about the rest of the series, putting me in a weird position. I'm sure someone will find some solace in this one, but as for me, the quality dips pretty rapidly here following this episode. But at least they did get the pilot right, so take that for what it's worth. Number 120, Aliens in America. The CW has never exactly had the best track record when it comes to sitcoms, but Aliens in America was very ahead of its time. The plot revolves around a family who decides to take in an immigrant student and host him in the United States, and the bond they will eventually make on one another, learning about different cultures and customs, is the heart of this series. There's a lot of familiar faces rounding out the cast, and the fact that CBS commissioned an entire music video, which is what you're seeing now, for the promotion of this show, yeah, creativity here is through the roof. Number 119, Suburgatory. I'll be damned if that gruff, cocky Lupo from the OG Law & Order can play in a suburban family sitcom as well as he can, but Jeremy Sisto, along with the rest of the great actors here like Cheryl Hines, Anna Gasteyer, and of course Jane Levy, all work excellently together. It might not be the most memorable show on this list, but the all-star cast wins big points with me, and there's enough here to keep me coming back for more. Number 118, Will and Grace. No, Watch Mojo, you are incorrect. This is not a top 10 sitcom of all time, but it is pretty good. If you've never watched Will and Grace, I can only assume you're a homophobic asshole, or you have just very bad taste in sitcoms, but I believe in second chances, so here's yours. The cast is delightful, the directing is great, solid joke-a-minute pacing, everything you'd expect and want from an A-tier 90s sitcom. Number 117, Eastbound and Down. Danny McBride is the only actor that could make Kenny Powers work as well of a character as he does, and man does it fucking work. HBO really knocked this one out of the park here. Yeah, shut up. Number 116, American Housewife. Katie Mixon has really transformed herself over the years, working her way up from playing the one-dimensional dumb stoner archetype on Mike and Molly to now playing alongside Renee Zellweger in the much-anticipated The Thing About Pam. The career transition she's had has been quite fascinating, leading to many interesting roles and projects. And while some might see American Housewife as a middle-of-the-road family sitcom without much to offer, I think that's what makes this show work as well as it does. It's not trying to be anything it's not trying to have any deep-seated messages or allegories about society's deepest, darkest problems. Similar to shows that I talked about earlier like Young and Hungry, it's a breezy sitcom about everyday people dealing with everyday problems, and sometimes that's exactly what you need in today's world. Number 115, Three's Company. First and foremost, R.I.P. John Ritter. The legacy he brought to all of his shows will forever and always be remembered, and Three's Company is arguably his most famous and best work in my opinion. If you haven't yet taken the deep dive into his filmography, start with this one because there's a lot of stuff that you can find here that's absolutely amazing. Number 114, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. If I was ranking all of these shows purely on their premise, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll would land in the top 5. A washed-up former hitmaker named Johnny Rock, played by Dennis Leary, learns about his daughter named Gigi, played by Elizabeth Gillies, a rising rock singer who's about to make it big. Johnny decides that he wants to get his life and band back together, and Gigi agrees to be their lead singer so long as Johnny remains a present figure in her life. It's a very novel concept that works as it balances the very chaotic, fast and hard lifestyle of being a rock superstar with the more nuanced human storyline of family and being there for one another. And the terrific performances of Leary and Gillies, who both have experience with musical projects in the past, add a lot to an already great show. The only main issue I have is that this should have been marketed as a drama, and certainly could have been a full 45-minute long episode, as I feel like most of the jokes get lost in the more emotional moments of the show. But even so, this is very entertaining, and I look forward to checking out more of it. Number 113, The Flintstones. The Flintstones is obviously one of the best adult cartoons out there. Is it as good as Family Guy, or South Park, or The Simpsons? Probably not. But this show was revolutionary back in the 60s, and still holds up today with impressive animation and voice work. Groundbreaking for its genre, it walked so that all those other shows could run, and they all owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Flintstones for helping get to the point that they're at now. Number 112, The Munsters. Shout out to my mom's friend Kat, who introduced this one to me and my brother years ago, and since then, I haven't looked back. The Munsters is a satire and parody series on the surface, but has a lot more going on behind its layers, and part of that is due to how the title family interacts with the rest of the characters. Specific dialogue and certain setups are meant to be an allegory for prejudice or how we treat each other based on the way we look, and the show is very self-aware of the fact that it's a comedy first by balancing these heavier topics with humor to lighten the mood. I've been preaching for years that this one is one to check out, so if you haven't already done so yet, here's your cue. Number 111, Becker. Probably Ted Danson's most overlooked show, Becker has just as much heart as it does comedy. Number 110, Kim's Convenience. I'm not sure how many people would argue in defense of Canada, giving the TV world many terrific sitcoms, but Kim's Convenience makes a pretty convincing argument for itself. The cast is really well balanced here with great banter and lots of heartwarming moments between each other. My only main issue with it is that the scale of the show feels a little smaller than I'd want it to be, but you could probably chop that up to this just being the first episode, and that does get resolved quicker in the later episodes, so it's not really that big of a deal. But even still, if you haven't seen this one yet, definitely would highly recommend. Number 109, 30 Rock. Man, 2 shows now that I consistently badmouth end up landing in the top 150. This must be a bad dream. Next thing you know, EDP is going to get hired in as a substitute teacher for a 4th grade class. But I gotta hand it to 30 Rock for coming off with a very strong first impression. Tina Fey's writing chops are, as usual, on point. Alec Baldwin is great here, and the setup of being a satire on what it's like to work for NBC is just such a novel concept and such a cool idea that I can't be upset by it. It's a shame they weren't able to stay consistent here though, because I really do like this first episode, but similar to the middle, I just feel like the rest of the series bottoms out pretty damn low compared to where it started, and it's hard for me to justify recommending it to you guys knowing what's coming next. But I will say, Tracy Morgan running around in his underwear screaming at traffic is funny as hell, so do with that what you will. Number 108, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Probably one of the best calls in TV history was to provide Mary Tyler Moore with her own series after the massive success of The Dick Van Dyke Show, as she had tons of charisma and charm. You could argue it's dated. In fact, this feels more dated than The Dick Van Dyke Show, despite debuting nearly 10 years afterwards. Man, the 70s were a weird time, my guy. But there's plenty of big laughs that come with this one all the same, and as stated before, Mary Tyler Moore is extremely fun and charismatic, so really can't go wrong with this one. Number 107, Home Movies. Although Adult Swim would eventually shoot the show's success into outer space, UPN deserves the credit for taking a chance with this first episode. And while it isn't as polished as many other adult animated shows on this ranking, there's a certain unexplainable charm with this show. So simple yet so entertaining at the same time. And if you still had any doubts, H. Jon Benjamin murders his performance as always. Number 106, How I Met Your Father. So I won't spend too much time here as I plan to make a video more in depth after the entire first season is finished airing, but what I'll say for now is I think I like this show more than most people, And I think this first episode did a lot right in introducing us to Sophie and her world, the same way that the original Yim Yim introduced Ted and his world. Hilary Duff is outstanding here and is easily the best part of this first episode, and it's always great to see the hidden details and Easter eggs the writer snuck in for diehard fans. With all that said, this is not a perfect show, and this pilot definitely has some kinks that the show as a whole is still trying to figure out. But from what I've seen so far, this definitely has the potential to go down as one of TV's best spin-offs if they continue in this direction. Number 105, Beavis and Butthead. What a simple idea that was executed to the highest degree possible. This is the prototype for how all MTV shows during this era would operate, and I can't complain because Beavis and Butthead fucking rules. Number 104, That 70s Show. Jackie is annoying as fuck in this first episode. Michael! 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 Like, someone tell that bitch to shut up already. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, because That 70s Show absolutely rules, and this episode is fantastic. But it's obvious that some of these characters definitely needed some tuning up here before the show could be as popular and as consistent as it ended up being. Especially Jackie, because if you don't believe me, go back and rewatch it. She does not shut the hell up. Number 103, The Simpsons. The Simpsons has always had some of their best work come in the form of their holiday-themed episodes. Just take a look at any one of the immensely popular Treehouse of Horror specials. And part of that must stem back from the fact that the very first episode of the show was a Christmas episode, which is filled with love and joy and jokes that make The Simpsons an instant favorite with both TV fans and critics. Number 102, Hoops. Am I seriously the only person on planet Earth that enjoys this show? Am I seriously the only person that's seen this show that actually enjoys it? Like, y'all would rather take stuff like BoJack Horseman over this? I mean, yeah, this isn't the most intelligent show on TV. It's very crude and dumb and stupid adult humor, but dude, that's what I've been preaching this whole time. Like, sometimes that's just what you need, you know? And Jake Johnson, outside of New Girl, is a very consistent actor, and he does a great job here. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but like, we seriously need to take a reevaluation of this one, because I think it's one of the most slept on, underrated adult comedies out there, and it works tremendously well. And finally, number 101, Hilda. Yeah, it's very, 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 very heavily inspired by Gravity Falls, but who says that's a bad thing? Gravity Falls is pretty awesome, and so is this show. Not to mention, Twig is the most adorable thing. As are you. That is, if you made it to the end here of part 3. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you here next week with part 4 as we break into the top 100 pilots of all time. Take care, everyone, and have a fantastic rest of your day.